Previously, on Detective Monroe Files, Detective Delilah Monroe and Qwan followed the final trail left behind by Elena Vale, believing they were investigating a death. Instead, Elena left them a warning. Then, they met Mara Venn, a woman who never threatened them, but somehow knew exactly where they would be. She smiled. She waited. And she disappeared, leaving behind more questions than answers. Monroe, I found something. What Vera uncovered would change the
For a few seconds, no one inside Monroe's car moved. Rain dragged silver lines down the windshield. Across the street, the alley swallowed the last pale edge of the umbrella until there was nothing left but wet brick and shadow. Qwan's hand remained near the glove compartment. Not inside it, near it. That was how Qwan threatened a room. Quietly, without making promises he didn't intend to keep. Max stood between the front seats, body angled toward the alley, ears forward. His breathing had changed. Low, measured, certain. Monroe watched the alley longer than she needed to. Then she looked down at the frozen frame on her phone. Elena Vale's face, caught mid-fear, pale, exhausted, trying not to break before the camera did. Qwan. She wanted you to see her. Monroe didn't answer. The umbrella woman. Mara. Qwan looked at her. You sure? Monroe replayed the image in her mind. The cream coat, the elevator reflection, the calm smile that never reached her eyes. The umbrella tilting just enough to say, I know you see me. Monroe. No. Qwan frowned. But she wanted me to be. That was worse. People who wanted to be seen usually needed something. Fear, credit, control. Mara moved like a woman who already had all three. Qwan lowered his hand from the glove compartment. Qwan. Then she's not hiding. Monroe looked toward the alley again. No. Max finally sat back down, but he did not relax. Neither did Monroe. Qwan looked at the recovered video again. Qwan. Elena said, they change people slowly. Monroe's eyes stayed forward. Monroe. She said they change trust. A beat. Qwan looked at her, noticing the distinction. Qwan. That bother you more? Monroe's hand tightened around the phone. It should bother everyone. Qwan. That wasn't my question. Monroe didn't look at him. That was answer enough. Vera called again at 2:42 a.m. The woman did not believe in sleep. She believed in evidence, caffeine, and telling detectives things they didn't want to hear. Monroe put the call on speaker. Vera, I found another folder. Qwan looked over. Monroe stared at the phone. Monroe, on Elena's laptop? Vera, not exactly. That was never a good answer. Vera's voice was lower now, less irritated, more careful. Vera, Elena had a local backup drive attached 3 days before she died. It was removed before we got there, but the system logged it. Qwan leaned closer. Qwan, device name? A brief pause. Vera, harbor safe. Monroe and Qwan looked at each other. Max shifted in the back seat. Monroe said, New Harbor had access to her machine. Maybe. Or she had access to theirs. Monroe's gaze sharpened. I recovered a partial directory tree. Most of it is corrupted, but there are labels. Paper shuffled on Vera's end. Intake notes, memory maps, compliance reactions, reinforcement cycles. Qwan stopped moving. Reinforcement cycles? That's what it says. Monroe felt something cold move beneath her ribs. Not fear. Recognition's ugly cousin. There's one folder Elena opened repeatedly before she died. Name? Vera hesitated. That made Monroe sit straighter. Returned subjects. Silence filled the car. Rain ticked against the roof. Quan's face changed. Not much. Just enough for Monroe to see him file the phrase away somewhere dangerous.
Monroe, send it. I already did.
A file arrived on Monroe's phone. No thumbnail. No preview. Just a compressed folder title. RV Subjects. Partial. Qwan looked at it. That's not a wellness center. Monroe opened the file. The screen loaded slowly. A list of names appeared. Some complete, some redacted. Some corrupted into symbols and broken letters. Then one line stopped Monroe cold. Not because she knew the name, because she knew the street. Subject 014, Vesper Heights referral. Closed. Qwan saw her face. Monroe? She scrolled. Another line. Subject 021, unresolved memory resistance. Another. Subject 024, identity attachment too strong. Another. Subject 030, returned. Monroe's thumb hovered above the screen. Detective? Monroe's voice was quieter now. How many? In this partial file? 32. Qwan exhaled slowly. But Monroe, that's just one directory.
They did not go to the precinct. Monroe knew what would happen if they did. Forms, questions, waiting. Someone asking whether they had probable cause, while the city quietly rearranged itself around another victim. Instead, Qwan drove. Monroe let him. That alone said more than she wanted it to. The car moved through narrow streets, shining black under rain, past closed stores and flickering signs, past people pretending not to see what the night carried. Max lay across the back seat, but his eyes remained open. Monroe kept scrolling the recovered file. Most names were useless. Initials, numbers, broken fragments. Then one entry opened with a corrupted image. A woman's intake photo. Most of the face damaged by digital noise. But the eyes were visible. Monroe froze. Qwan noticed immediately. What? Monroe enlarged the image. The woman was younger. Maybe 22? Maybe 23? The file labeled her Subject 017, D. Monroe, preliminary exposure. The car drifted slightly before Qwan corrected it. Qwan. No. Monroe stared at the screen. The rain outside became too loud, then too far away. Her own breathing sounded unfamiliar. Qwan? Monroe? She didn't answer. The name did not belong there. But it did. The worst truths always entered quietly. Qwan pulled into an empty service lot behind a closed pharmacy and put the car in park. Look at me. Monroe kept staring at the file. Delilah. That reached her. Not because he used her first name, because he almost never did. Monroe looked up. Quan's face was calm, but his eyes weren't. Deep blue. Too clear in the dark. Too honest for the moment. That could be fake. Monroe gave a small, humorless breath.
You don't believe that? Qwan said,
I believe people plant things. Monroe sighed. So do I. She looked back at the file. That's why this scares me. Max rose from the back seat and pushed his head between them. Not excited. Not restless. Grounding. Monroe placed her hand on his head without looking away from the phone. The file included one attached note. Qwan opened it before she could decide not to. The text was damaged, but readable in pieces. Subject presented high resistance to suggestion. Strong observational defenses. Memory anchors unusually persistent. Exposure discontinued after incident involving juvenile companion. Qwan stopped reading. Monroe looked at him. Juvenile companion? Qwan said nothing. That was the second thing that scared her. Qwan always had something to say when the room needed air. Now he just looked at the screen. Then at her. Monroe. Qwan. His jaw tightened. I don't know. Monroe held his gaze. Don't do that. Do what? Protect me by lying badly. Qwan looked away first. Max whined once. Soft. Low. A sound Monroe almost never heard from him. The car felt suddenly too small. The note contained a location. Not New Harbor. Not Vesper Heights. An address on the east side of the city, where buildings went to become stories nobody wanted to tell. Qwan told her they should wait. Monroe opened the car door, despite Monroe's inner voice yelling at her. Because smart people still made dangerous choices when the truth touched something personal. Rain hit Monroe's hat and shoulders as she stepped into the service lot. Qwan was out of the car a second later. Qwan. Monroe. She didn't stop. Qwan. Delilah. That stopped her. Barely. Qwan moved around the front of the car, rain darkening his hoodie. We don't know what that file is. Monroe. We know Elena died after finding hers. Exactly. Then we don't wait. Qwan looked at her like he wanted to argue, and knew every argument would sound like fear. Qwan stared at her. You hear yourself? Every word. That's the problem. For a second, neither moved. Rain filled the space between them. Max jumped out of the car and stood beside Monroe. Not between her and Qwan, beside her. That hurt Qwan more than he expected. Monroe saw it. I'm not asking you to come. Qwan laughed once. No humor. You always say cruel things politely. Monroe looked away. Get in the car. Qwan. We go together, or I follow you badly and make this more irritating for both of us. Monroe almost smiled. Almost. You threatening me with inconvenience? It's worked before. Max looked between them. If dogs could sigh, Max did. Monroe got back in the car, but she did not feel relieved. She felt the city turning toward her. The address led to a building that looked abandoned, in the way old institutions did. Not empty. Waiting. 3 stories of stained brick, boarded lower windows, a rusted side gate. No sign. No cameras visible, which usually meant cameras were not meant to be visible. Qwan parked half a block away, with the lights off. Monroe studied the building through the rain. Max stood in the back seat, his body alert now. Not curious. Certain. Qwan. He knows this place. Monroe looked back at Max. He's never been here. Qwan didn't answer. Monroe did not like how the silence agreed with him. They approached from the alley. The rain softened their footsteps. A chain hung loose across the side gate. Not locked, just placed, like someone expected obedience more than security. Qwan lifted the chain and looked at Monroe.
Qwan, still time to make a good decision. Monroe stepped through. Monroe, I'll let you know when I see one. Inside the alley, the building smelled like wet brick, old metal, and something medicinal buried beneath dust. Max stopped at a side door. His nose lowered. Then his head lifted slowly. Monroe watched him. Max? He looked at her, then at the door. Qwan reached for the handle. Monroe caught his wrist. Wait. He looked at her hand on him, then at her. That pause carried too much history for the moment. From inside the building came a sound. Not footsteps, not voices. A recording. Faint, distorted. A woman's voice saying, "Begin again." Monroe's hand went cold. Qwan heard it too. "Qwan, we leave." Monroe did not move. The voice repeated, "Begin again." Max growled, low. Not at the door. At Monroe. No, not at her. For her. Warning her about something inside herself. Qwan's voice dropped. "Qwan. Delilah." Monroe whispered before she meant to. "I know that voice." Qwan went still. "Whose?" The recording crackled. Then a second voice followed. Younger. Shaky. Familiar enough to make Monroe's chest tighten. Young Monroe. "I don't want to forget him." The alley disappeared. The rain disappeared. For one horrible second, Monroe was not a detective standing outside an abandoned building. She was a girl in a bright room. Too bright. A chair too large for her body. A woman in cream smiling gently. A boy's hand slipping from hers. Then Qwan's hand closed around her arm. "Monroe!" She blinked. The alley returned. Max barked once. Sharp. Commanding. The side door clicked open from the inside. Qwan stepped in first. Monroe hated that. She let him. That scared her more than the building. Inside, the corridor sloped downward. Not a basement, exactly. Something older. Institutional tile lined the walls, cracked and yellowed with age. The lights flickered overhead in uneven pulses. Max stayed close to Monroe's left side. Every few feet, he looked up at her like he was checking whether she was still fully there. She wasn't sure. At the end of the corridor stood a door with no handle on their side. Qwan scanned the frame.
Electronic lock.
Monroe looked at the keypad. 4 digits. Her hand moved before she thought. Qwan caught her wrist again.
How do you know it?
Monroe stared at the keypad. She didn't know. That was the problem. Her fingers trembled once. Barely. But Qwan saw it. "I don't."
Then don't.
Behind the door, a speaker crackled. Mara's voice filled the corridor. Soft. Warm. Too close. "Detective Monroe." Max snarled. Qwan turned slowly toward the speaker. She knew we were coming. Monroe looked at the keypad. Mara continued. "You always were difficult to redirect." The hallway seemed to tilt. Monroe steadied herself without meaning to. Qwan noticed. "We are leaving." He always says that when he's afraid. Qwan's face changed. Just once. There it was. Not fear. Recognition. Monroe looked at him. What does that mean? Qwan didn't answer fast enough. Mara's voice softened. Hello, Qwan Tai. Silence slammed into the corridor. Monroe stared at Qwan. Qwan Tai? His jaw tightened. Nobody calls me that. Not anymore.
Max stepped forward, placing himself between Monroe and the door. But Monroe was looking at Qwan now, not because he betrayed her, but because the past had just opened its eyes. Mara's voice came again. You were both such loyal children. Qwan slammed his palm against the wall near the speaker.
Open the door.
Mara laughed softly. Not cruel. Worse. Fond. You still think doors are the problem. The keypad lit up by itself. 4 numbers appeared. Monroe stared. Qwan looked at her.
Don't.
But Monroe already understood. The number wasn't random. March 17. The day she found Max. Or the day she thought she did. Her stomach turned. No. Mara's voice whispered through the speaker. Begin again. The lock clicked. The door opened. The room beyond the door was not large. That made it worse. Large rooms gave fear somewhere to spread. Small rooms kept it close. A metal table stood in the center. An old projector sat against the wall. File cabinets lined one side. On the far wall, dozens of photographs had been pinned beneath clear plastic. Elena Vale. Tanya Brooks. Other faces Monroe didn't know. And then, Monroe. Not one photo. Several. Young Monroe outside a school. Young Monroe sitting on a stoop beside a boy with blue eyes. Young Monroe holding a black puppy with a white patch on his chest. Monroe's breath stopped. Max stepped forward. The dog in the picture was smaller, younger, but the white patch was unmistakable. Qwan whispered something under his breath. Not English. Not fully. A prayer or a curse. Monroe moved closer to the wall. Her hand lifted toward the photo of the puppy. Max pressed against her leg hard enough to stop her. Qwan looked at the file cabinet. One drawer was open. One file placed on top. Waiting. The label read, Subject 017, Delilah Monroe. Underneath, status, returned subject. For the first time all night, Monroe looked afraid. Not of Mara, not of the room, of herself. Qwan picked up the file. His hands were steady. His voice was not. Monroe. She looked at him. He turned one page, then another. His face drained. What? Qwan did not answer, so Monroe took the file from him. At the top of the page was a treatment summary. Most lines were redacted, but one sentence remained untouched. Subject retains emotional bond to canine anchor and juvenile companion. Removal unsuccessful. Monroe looked slowly at Max.
then at Qwan. Qwan's eyes were white now, not crying, fighting the kind of memory that does not ask permission before returning. Juvenile companion. Qwan looked away. It was you. He closed his eyes, only for a second, but it was enough. A speaker crackled behind them.
Memory is not truth, Detective. Monroe looked up. It is loyalty, with better lighting. The projector clicked on. White light flooded the wall. A video began playing. Grainy. Old. A younger Monroe sat in a chair, jaw tight, eyes furious. Beside her sat a boy. Qwan. Younger. Protective even then. Between them sat a black puppy with a white patch. Max. A woman stepped into frame wearing cream. Not Mara exactly. Younger. But the smile was the same. The voice was the same. We're going to help you let go. Young Monroe stared at her. I don't want to let go. The video distorted. Static tore across the wall. Then young Qwan shouted, "Don't touch her!" The recording cut. Lights flickered. The room went dark. For 1 second, no one breathed. Then the emergency light snapped on red. The door behind them slammed shut. Qwan moved first. Max barked. Monroe turned toward the speaker. Mara's voice came softly through the dark. Welcome back, Delilah. The red light pulsed. Monroe stood very still. Then she smiled. Small. Cold. Not because she was fine. Because something inside her had stopped running. You should have left me forgotten. Max growled. Qwan stepped beside her. Not in front of her. Beside her. The camera pulls back. Monroe, Qwan, Max, locked in the room beneath a building with no sign, while rain drowned the city above them.